so let's get started. So, we came up with some slide deck, a slide deck, and we came up with some questions and things we want to talk about. But we really want this to be an opportunity for you guys to share, what you like. I'm always saying how we watch stuff and there's no outlet. So let this be an outlet. Let's figure out what that could feel like. Just by talking about like what this film did for us. Alex has already gotten us started off, and that was a really great, great introduction to the film, I think. I was trying to figure out why we even chose this one to start with. We were just like, we want to do something virtual, and self-made came up. It might have been me, it might have been somebody else, but it's been on a lot of people's, tongues and minds lately, and have heard such varied reactions to it. So one of the things that I love about this process is getting to see how differently we respond to content based on who we are, right? So some of us like loved it and some of us hated it, and this idea that like all Black people watch the same stuff and like the same stuff is completely ridiculous, right? Because we get to see how, how varied the reactions are to one piece of art. So yeah, please shout out some first impressions. Shout out, like, Evan said a little bit about what he thought about it, but I really just want to hear what you guys, how you reacted to it.
Can I say something just to set a foundation real quick?
Okay.
Just throw it out there. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Bob, do you want us to use the raise hand thing on here when we talk?
I mean, it's a small enough group that you could actually wave. I don't know. If I'm not seeing you, I have everybody showing up right here. So I could just call on your name if you look like you're itching to say something.
I know this. I'm just gonna say this. I know this is already, all you very brilliant people have seen this already, but I didn't catch it till the second time, so I'm not as brilliant. Let me just say it's inspired by Madam C.J. Walker. That's all I gotta say. Story inspired by, as opposed to it is. There you go. That's all I had to say.
I want other people to say things about that because I have a lot to say about that.
I mean, so I'll say initially I thought it was like a biopic, like definitely thought it was like totally based on her life, but Lola Day brought it up to me like, yeah, some of it was fiction in there, which I think, I'd love to hear more from the group about like the decision to do that. Like just cinematically, like why they would throw in some fiction on such like an important story. I don't think it took away from the purpose of the film though. I think it was still inspiring. I think the message of, white gays, that's real.
Bell hooks in the house, right?
Right, that's real. I do think like, the fiction was an element, that, kind of, it was a direction that the director took. But I think overall, like the message of like, this was inspiring. It was a Black woman who was doing things that had never been done. Like that was still a prominent message for me.
For me, I wish it would have been more based on factual content. And I think there were several dividers in the movie in reference to colorism and in reference to the relationships between women and their husbands, and then just kind of promoting the whole angry Black female narrative. It was a lot of different things in there that I think probably could have been left out and presented in a more positive light instead of perpetuating stereotypes that are kind of already out there.
I'm sorry, who was that talking? I'm sorry.
This is Shauna Huff.
Hey, Shauna.
Yeah, I think I had a similar feel because, at first I thought it was, I thought it was fully about Madam C.J. Walker, but I'm a person that likes, history. I like facts. So I just feel like, if you're going to do something about someone and you're saying like, this is Madam C.J. Walker, I think kind of like what David said, it didn't take away from like the narrative of, her being self-made, but I think it took away from her personal story, if you're adding things or taking things away. And I know that, it's real people in real lives involved. So even like the Addie Monroe character, it's like she has, a family that they're like, you did not depict my great-grandmother correctly. Like, that's so false. So I think, or even little things about like her daughter, that they added stuff that, that's not actually proven. So I don't know, I just felt kind of like, yeah, it'd be nice if they didn't have to add things. It'd be nice if it was just what it was, but yeah.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that?
It felt like there was an agenda too.
Should use the A word. Okay. Say more about that.
Yeah, let me hear that one.
Well, I mean, if it's fantasy, why are there certain topics that you're pushing? If it's, you know, fantasy, there's other things we can imagine to present, right?
Ooh,
but it's these
fire.
specific tropey, you know, caricatures that has been in history forever. It's time to do a new narrative. We're living in Wakanda times. We don't have to, you know. Anyway,
I'm curious, Martin. Where did you see specifically an agenda, and what you want to expound on where you may have seen some of that?
I, as you know, the woman is straight, right? So I see the idea that the Black woman has to be the savior and neglect themselves so that they can prove their worth constantly.
Ooh,
and no matter what they do, they're never going to be worth it because their husband's going to leave them for a light-skinned woman, and everybody's going to be against them.
I'm passed out.
Okay, let me throw out a question, right? Okay.
Truth being told in here. Okay, continue. I have to go get my notebook.
Take it easy over there.
No, okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just being fun. Let me think about this. When I looked at it again, there's two things I want to know people think about. A couple things. First of all, and anybody look up this Addie Monroe character obviously never existed, right? So she was based on another lady. I forgot the name of the lady. I wrote it down here somewhere.
Annie Monroe.
Annie Monroe.
Annie Monroe.
A lady who actually supposedly
Annie Malone.
Annie Malone.
Right.
A lady who actually helped C.J. Walker early on. She worked with her. So there's two things. The company's thing going on. You know, this is she died in 1919, right? So we're talking about early 20th century. So I felt like they had. It's interesting. I felt like they were playing with every antagonist. Like, first of all, the antagonists were kind of a little convoluted to me. They had colorism as one, I guess. Is that the term? Is that the proper term, colorism?
Yeah.
And then they had patriarchy as another patriarchal sort of culture with Black men and her facing that. I don't recall the race thing as much of being an obstacle. They sort of lean more on sort of on the Black man, the patriarchy, or just patriarchy in general, which is period. And then also the colorism angle, which kind of got to be way too much. You know what I mean? I mean, it was it necessary? First of all, Addie Monroe didn't even exist. So I mean, and so part of me too. Let me go back to the whole fictionalizing historical fiction. All right, which is what I guess that is. You know, part of me, and this gets to one of my big problems with it, has to do with not giving the audience the benefit of the doubt. You know, not giving the audience the benefit of the doubt in terms of our intelligence, not understanding that the time and the story is fictional without those specific gimmicks being contrived to drive the story. You know, I'll just go there. Like one example, say this is the music, which I listened to the second time, which I caught the second time around, right? It was pop, rock, all that stuff. And I said to myself, well, let me go to IMDb. Who did the music? Right? And so they had this white boy do the music, right? Who, before that, had done some like ski or surfer movie music. And all of a sudden now he's doing the score music for a story, historical fiction about a Black iconic figure. That to me is disrespectful. You know, not only is it disrespectful because the music they picked, you know, it's almost like they say, oh, they got to hear this up-to-date music for them to follow the story or feel or stay interested. You know, and we know during that time, what was like some of the main music during that time for Black people? Ragtime. I think Ragtime was one of them. Was Ragtime in that period? Come on, Willies. Was it Ragtime and a lot of other kind of blues, a lot of other kind of rich music that could have played really well if the music person did their research and felt like it was worth sort of bringing that kind of depth to the musical score. That was horrible and disrespectful. I caught that the second time around because I was so, first time around I was looking at other things like the dancing. That's all I think, the dancing women and the boxing stuff that was absolutely unnecessary.
I totally ate up the dancing.
You like the dancing? I did not. I thought that stuff was unnecessary. But anyway, that's my statement on that.
I love, Evan is again a rigorous scholar of the liturgy of drama. So you know what I mean? Like he's gonna have a very rigorous critique of this, and I love to hear it. And Sabrina also, studied film in undergrad at Yale. So I want to hear more. I mean, I guess we'll talk more about it later, but it's just crazy to me how different everyone's perspectives are. Anybody else have like first impressions, thoughts? Initial reaction.
I just wanted to weigh in on the prior point about like it being fictional and people being able to imagine it. I think it's particularly interesting to me, this point that Martine brought up, because as Black people, our reality have always been like imagined by other people, right? So in a certain way, like you wouldn't get a historical white figure and just say like, oh, let's just imagine what the life of this person was like. Let's imagine what their family relations were like. No, you just say, oh, this was a white person, they're important, you tell it how it is. You go back to the historical fact, like other people mentioned. So, and it would be completely unacceptable, as Evan said, to have like, oh, let's just like kind of put some mishmash of music here, like, and something that would just kind of like, let's just patchwork some music and put this together and then just kind of like let it out. So then people would have extensive research and they would make extensive interviews to describe how they went to this little town in middle Massachusetts to get the fine tune of what it sounded like in the 1800s, like, right? So then I think for me, it's also a matter of like the politics behind it being Black content, but then not necessarily being innovative in the way that it could be a way to just be like, oh, we've always been not sure about what the Black experience is like, so let's just give you the room to imagine what that's like, instead of giving Black people the tools to show their story through something that's kind of like more mainstream. But
wow, our reality is always being imagined by other people. Any other thoughts? I'm really curious if you guys think, so, talking about the fictionalization and this lack of research, do you think, like, has this happened with white historical figures? Like, is it a common thing to fictionalize somebody's story in this way? I know that people definitely take liberty, right, to some extent, but do you think like if they made a story about the first white female millionaire, it would have been this tropey?
I have a thought, but I'm gonna wait somebody else to go because I have a thought.
Martine said it was the start of the Harlem Renaissance.
This is Shauna Huff. I personally don't think it would have been portrayed in the same format if it was a white figure, because they're going to always they're going to always present themselves in the most positive light and the great white hope type light in anything that they present. So with us, already being behind in so many different areas and in our portrayal in the mass media, it's even more important not for us to be displayed in that site, especially when you're talking about someone as significant as Madam C.J. Walker.
Wow.
Just jumping on what you said, Shauna, the Great White Hope is the fictional. So they live in fiction.
Right.
Ooh.
Correct.
I didn't go to church today. I'm sorry, I didn't dress for church.
Right.
It's interesting because the Great White Hope was, I guess, fictional story. It felt funny of that fight between Jack Johnson and Jim Jeffries, and that was happening during that time. Remember they portrayed that in the film. One thing, let me just say this: I mean, and this depends, right? Like, I would have a problem. I don't necessarily have a problem with what you call historical fiction, right? Matter of fact, I was pulling up this book I read that was great, based on but interestingly enough, based on a white, loosely on anybody familiar with Russell Banks? Russell Banks?
Yes.
maybe this is not the best comparison, but he wrote a book called Cloud Splitter, right? And it's historical fiction, and it's based on like John Brown, one of John Brown's sons. So you're following John Brown's son up until Harper's Ferry, and then afterwards he somehow survives. So I don't think any of his sons survived, but it might be bad only because it's John Brown. Because I remember I'm a big fan of John Brown, and I remember seeing apparently there's some series coming out now about him. I don't have much faith in it, but I don't. But I remember watching a John Brown movie as a little kid, not really knowing who John Brown was, but it was one of those silent films, and they made him look like this crazy white man who had who was out of his mind. You know what I mean? That was, I think it was a silent film or something. It was John, if they're portraying John Brown, anytime when it was a silent film, he's going to be portrayed like he's nuts, right? But my point is, like, that book by Russell Banks, historical fiction, is it's a real well done novel. I don't know if they're going to make it into a film. But if historical fiction is done extremely well, yeah, that's great. I feel like with Madam C.J. Walker, and like I said, I've never written a script. I know some writers. I've seen Spike Lee do it in the autobiography of Malcolm X, in the Malcolm X movie, where there was one moment where like he made up, and I was like, Spike, that didn't happen, But you wanted to throw that in there to incite your story somehow,
What scene was that?
Huh?
What scene was that?
It was a scene when he was in prison. And he said something about Christianity, but in his Malcolm X book, Malcolm X never said. That was Spike.
Okay.
I forgot this, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember what scene it was. I remember what exactly was said, but I knew that it expressed basically Spike's angst toward Christianity. It wasn't what Malcolm X said, right? Not in his autobiography that Alex Haley wrote, right? Using his words, right? So like with Madam C.J. Walker, I think one of the biggest problems. Let me talk about some things I liked. Okay, I like the fact that it's just because I don't want to sound like this dude's like C.J. Walker. I like the fact that people now like, oh, Madam C.J. Walker, because there's people, believe it or not, who don't know who she is, right? I honestly liked the performances of most of the actors, except for one who I thought was miscast. Right.
I'm not gonna say
I feel like we all know who it is. We all know.
Say the name. Okay, let's scream it out on three. 1, 2, 3. Y'all are so scared.
I'm not doing it. Not yet. You already know.
It's Tiffany Haddish. People say that Tiffany Haddish is miscast. I loved her, so I want to hear you talk about how come you didn't.
Oh gosh, no.
I loved her because I didn't watch Girls
Trip.
Trip.
Tiffany Haddish. You say you love Tiffany.
I loved Tiffany. I loved having the opportunity to watch her in a role that was meaningful. I did not watch Girls Trip. I haven't watched any of her stuff because once you show me a grown Black woman peeing on a crowd in a trailer, why would I go and watch that film?
Yeah,
right? So like everything else from Tiffany Haddish has been in that category.
Mm-hmm.
So for one, she's playing somebody who is like, again.
But I didn't feel like I learned who that person was. I feel like I just saw Tiffany Haddish in that period.
She was miscast.
That's what I felt like.
Yeah. She was miscast. I mean, I'm not knocking Tiffany. I want her to get her bag.
Why do people keep saying that? That's like that's like what you say when you really don't think somebody's talented, but you're like, I don't want her to be poor.
No, I don't want to be poor. No, but no, she was miscast. But I'm gonna get. But
I feel like since the beginning of her career, I haven't heard much about her talent from anybody. The only thing people have said about her is like, I don't want her to be poor. I want her to get her bag.
I just feel like she's like the movie Cardi B, from what I'm getting the sense. She's like the Cardi B of like actors.
Who said that?
I said it, Faith.
Oh yeah, I can see my movie. Okay, Faith. Yeah, that's a good movie, Cardi B. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say that I liked Octavia's. I thought Octavia was solid. The breakout performer for me was Kevin Carroll as Ransom.
The lawyer, right?
The lawyer.
I loved him. I totally loved him.
Kevin's quietly been a great actor, like on the stage scene for a long time. He's just starting to get his breaks.
I loved him. I don't know if he made it into my. I had written something about his character in one of my drafts of the thing that I shared.
Yeah. So the actors in general, I like, but I like one was miscast, and we can get to that another time.
Well, I say things about Tiffany Haddish.
Me?
Yeah.
No, my sister is trying to say something, but
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that to me also threw me off, to be honest. And I haven't watched any of Tiffany's stuff. I mean, I've seen trailers and I know like her type of genre, hence why I haven't really watched her stuff. But I think I couldn't get past her. You know, I couldn't get past her face to even delve into the character, because all I saw was like Tiffany, and it just like took away from the film for me. And another thing too, like going back to the whole like, I like history, I like facts, I like for things to at least look realistic. And, you know, I just know that they were supposed to, her daughter was supposed to be like 19 years old, you know, and like I just couldn't, when she would be talking about mom and like college, I was like, this is just not looking correct to me. Like it just was not adding up. I was like, there are so many like young Black women that I think could also have been really like able to play that role, because I couldn't get past the fact that she's, you know, like in her 40s playing a 19-year-old, but it wasn't meshing for me, you know, it wasn't blending. So I just could not get past it. Like I couldn't, anytime she came on, I was just like, I was like, what's happening? I couldn't connect the two people as like, this is her daughter. I just couldn't get past it. And I feel like I would have loved to know about her story more, because I read into the real person and it seems like she has a very interesting background. So I wish I would have loved to just get more intel on who she really was. And then the whole thing with her, her sexuality and all those things, I also know that I feel like that was put in there because just based on history and people saying that wasn't really, you know, that very well could not have been true. She just threw a lot of parties and was friends with a lot of people, but I think they just maybe wanted to put that in there just to add, you know, just to add that for some reason. So I thought that was also almost like a bit of an agenda thing in a way.
Which parts, who's aware enough of the real story to share which parts of this film are not accurate?
So I just discovered this last night. So the whole time I was watching it, I was like, is that true? Did it really happen like that? You know?
Say that again, Ulani?
Huh?
Say that again. I got a text from one of my friends. She's not going to be on. Go ahead.
No, but I was just saying, that as the whole time I was watching it, I was questioning whether it was accurate, right? Because I hadn't, because like, you know, again, I had very little knowledge of Madam C.J. Walker. The main thing I knew about her was she invented the perm, you know? And like, I probably learned that when I was going natural. So I was like, I'm not interested, you know, that much in the character, right? But I didn't hear, I think I started to hear the first Black woman millionaire thing more recently. But initially it was just like, oh, she invented the perm and she sold a lot of, you know, perm kits. But, you know, when I was doing the research, because I was like, okay, I have to get this review out. I didn't know that so much of it was false. So like this Addie Monroe character, right? Mm-hmm. She, like we talked a little bit about it earlier, her name was Annie Malone, and she actually helped Madam C.J. Well, like the whole rivalry, that was another thing that like in the story, like why would you downplay the fact she stole a recipe? You know, like if she actually stole it, that shouldn't just be one line in an entire 4-part series. So that was highly inaccurate. You know, what Twitter said is that she wasn't actually light-skinned, so there's no colorism issue there. Like, so there's a lot of that. And then the way that her husband, I read reports about how her husband and her were actually equal. It wasn't really her, like, you know, running the show entirely the way it was portrayed in the film. I was gonna look into the whole thing about her daughter's sexuality. Does anybody know if that was untrue, like completely? I think
and it might be the sexuality thing. I'm thinking that might be hard to find out, right? Given that back in those days, people couldn't be open.
Yeah. There's always, like with the whole Malcolm X thing, you know, I don't want to go down that path, but you know, there's always those sources that say, oh, this person had this relationship or whatever. So I'm just curious if that actually exists, you know, at a substantial level, or if it was just something that the director was like, oh, we want to make it modern, so we'll make her, you know.
I know she was married multiple times.
She was?
You know, Yeah, you know what I mean? So that's part of the narrative that, you know, she was, I guess, homosexual, and then she only had that one husband, and then she was supposed to fall in love with the, you know, the lady that she had been dealing with. That's a little kind of dispute if she was married multiple times. So that kind of narrative didn't kind of play out with her and the woman. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that some people who, you know, just do historical research, they were just like, you know, they haven't found any like letters or anything that is saying that it is actually fact. And I know that her like great granddaughter said that that wasn't a cause of strife between like her and her mother. Like that was never like a conversation thing that really happened. But I know that they said that she threw a lot of like elaborate parties in Harlem that had a lot of artists or people who were, you know, out. So maybe just people in her circle were, so they just maybe wanted to put that in there, but I don't think there was like actual factual things. But kind of like what Alex said, it's sometimes you might not know just because that's so long ago and people might not have been super out like that, but there wasn't any evidence that it was true. But in the film, it made it like this was a factual thing.
This is the power of media, man. I think it's like, you know, people, we're sitting here discussing this. We've done a little bit looking into it. A lot of people don't. They take it and they, you know, they say, okay, well, this is how it is. And I think that's dangerous for Black people. It's dangerous for anybody. It's dangerous for us. You know, yeah, it is. Because I mean, people like even Madam C.J. Walker. I mean, there are parts of it, obviously, that I think were inspirational. When I looked at it again, even though they never really fully resolved this Addie Monroe, C.J. Walker thing, I think that last scene between her and Carmen, who I think Carmen's really a good actress. It seemed like, okay, she's having this discussion with Carmen. Carmen starts to cry, and that's the end of the lawsuit. You know, I don't know. You know, I mean, so, I mean, after all these years, you know, I mean, you know, she got through to her in that one little conversation, you know, which may make me think this should have been the issue from the beginning. And I think, yeah, for real, I think if it was going to end so like easily, you know, and then, you know, going back to just the race, which is a major, you know, I think now that I think about it, there's probably only 2 instances in the entire thing that I can remember where the antagonist of race, you know, remember they had W.E.B. Du Bois in there, right? He wrote, remember Souls of Black Folk? I don't know, anybody ever get a chance to read that?
How familiar are people with Du Bois in here?
W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the way they portrayed them in the movie. They definitely showed like there was like some animosity, but they also did learn from each other. So I thought that was pretty interesting the way they introduced each one to within the series. So
yeah, I thought that was very accurate based on the
it was. That part was the only thing I thought was accurate historically.
Yeah, that was accurate. I think you know what. So Du Bois said, top of the 20th century, the problem of 20th century is going to be race, right? So I think that's how he quoted it, right?
The color line.
The color line, right? So,
I was gonna say that's really, really interesting. Like the part you were talking about of like race and like racism being like an antagonist, like that was never really brought up. Like the only white interaction that I saw from Madam C.J. Walker was with Rockefeller, and it was like almost a positive interaction. Like,
which makes sense.
How was it positive? He was like, "Oh, fire them bitches."
Well, like, he's a businessman. He's a businessman.
But he was, he's a businessman. He gave her sound business advice.
You're the next door neighbor now, so I have to tolerate you. Fire them bitches. Let them all starve.
But like their interaction was friendly. Like she wasn't like, oh, this white guy is like, you know, shooting guns close to my property. Like it was like they were friendly. And then she went to the business meeting where she was trying to get her product into all those stores. Like it was almost a positive interaction. Like they didn't, like racism didn't play a role in the movie.
I see what you're saying. So all the white people in the movie were not racist.
The only 2.
I don't think it's that black and white. I think, you know, they just didn't focus so much on the probability that they kind of danced around the racism piece and making the white man, as he usually is, especially in business with a Black woman. They didn't make that a focal point.
Yeah. I think the only two times you see it honest was remember when Ransom showed up and he said the white man said he scratched his luggage, and then he was like, "You called me a liar," and then Ransom said, "How are we gonna start?" And then I love that short monologue of Ransom when Sweetness died protecting his son. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That was a great moment by Kevin's character. Where he's, great moment.
I love that.
Where Sweetness got lynched, right? But I don't know how they're gonna tell her story, and I just don't know. I mean, but I know how. Just like, what was that term you used, Martine, earlier?
White gaze. It's still in all caps in the chat if you want to check
Right,
it out.
right. I know. I knew what it was. I just wanted to hear it one more time. Thank you.
I love it.
Actually, can we go back to Booker T. Washington?
Yes.
Just because I feel like the whole Black Woman Club and him portrayal with women, I think this time period was wrong. And the reason why I say that, I'm looking at it from a health perspective. At the time that they're saying that this occurred, they're saying that he was against women around like 1908. They're saying this took place. And I find that to be impossible because at his school he was the first person to allow a Black woman to become licensed in Alabama at that time. So, and she came from, and that's why everything has to be taken into context, because I researched this from the health perspective. So she was one of the first Black women to pass the licensing exam in Alabama, and that was because of Booker T.
Your face.
And Booker T was
yeah. Hold on a second. See this? That's for you.
So at the same time, he was in heavy contact with one of the first women medical schools. And like he wrote frequently with white women about women progress and things like that at that time. So I was very curious with how they portrayed him in this period, because I'm like, you're not even portraying him in the right period. He did have an issue with women, but that was a much earlier period. So I was very curious about that. And also Black women clubs were huge when it comes to health and pushing past health policy and public health. So I was very shocked that they portrayed them as women who just sat in the kitchen. I was like, that makes no sense. Like from the time period, it just was not accurate from what I know about it from the health perspective.
Right.
As a caveat to that, I went to Hampton University for undergrad, and we were infused with the information that Booker T. Washington, he put most of the resources that he allocated for the school into the nursing school. So he was about building up an entire race, if he could, I guess, of women working and being, like you said, licensed to work and being taken seriously. I think if we really wanted to dissect his approach or the way that they portrayed his approach, it's quite probable that he could have been that way towards C.J. Walker, because currently we have people who are successful Black business people, entrepreneurs, and we may think their business is ratchet. And he may have just really been like, you know what? I'm about uplifting Black women, but not through this.
Yeah.
He may not have had the vision for exactly what she was doing or the way she was doing it. That's all.
It's interesting that he didn't have it, but Du Bois had it.
But Du Bois was a lot more flexible, given where he was.
Exactly.
So
that's true. The way it was.
I want to do something really quick, because a few people joined us a bit into the convo, and I want to make sure that everybody knows who, because one of the most important things about, looking at our perspective as Black people is understanding like who's in the room, right? And what they're saying and like where they're coming from. So I wanted to make sure that everybody kind of has a sense of that, right? So Faith's comment is very important, because when we think about Black solutions, we don't think interdisciplinarily. We tend to, everybody tends to work in their own lane. And so what I love about this conversation is we have people, you know, Faith is a medical student, like I mentioned before, and studying public health. And we have very fascinating conversations about the history of medicine and the fact that doctors don't learn medical history. So
They don't.
like, and Shauna, you mentioned that you went to an HBCU, but I don't think I heard you say, because you went to Hampton.
Yes,
Yeah.
for undergrad. I went to Hampton, then I went to Duke and NYU.
Yeah.
So
So
I've had both experiences. I say that not, you know, just to say that I've had both experiences.
do you want to do like a quick, you know, 3-word intro, tell everybody where you're at and any of your initial impressions about the film?
Okay, well, I'm Shauna Wells. I'm originally from Brooklyn. Right now I'm in Virginia, thank God, because it's a lot safer than New York. So it's so interesting. There is a value add to having had joined the conversation late, because you guys were already kind of ramped up and into it. And I got to hear so many really, really interesting perspectives that I hadn't considered. I watched this movie with my 11-year-old, and on purpose, because I always want her, I'm a businesswoman. I'm an investor and I have a construction company. And so I'm always trying to show her in different ways how you can be a businesswoman. And I was hoping that, you know, this would be an entertaining way to show her that. And she got it. But I also was hoping for a little bit of historical reference. And I found that, much like many of you, those were the parts that I had to explain, the truths and the untruths. Also, I'm on the fence about why I'm always having to understand and explain the sexual component in our stories. So even, you know, when we see these stories, whether they be historical fiction or just historically accurate, there's always, depending upon what type of story it is, there isn't necessarily, like, we don't see the sexual predilection of J. Rockefeller, or, you know, when we're watching Roosevelt. We don't know that these men were probably gay and freaks and all kinds of stuff. No, because that doesn't matter to what they're trying to portray about that particular historical figure. I find it interesting that whenever we talk about our people in history, that we have to see that either the man was a womanizer or the woman had, you know, or whomever sexual preferences. So I say all that to say, let me wrap it up, that I found that unnecessary. I found Tiffany Haddish pretty bad, and mainly for the reason of she's done a disservice to herself by not becoming an actress that can turn you away from what she has done already. So we're so used to seeing what she has done already that we can't see her in anything else. And she's had enough time and enough resource to cultivate herself into a different type of actress, or, you know, a real actress and not a comedian trying to be an actress.
Wow.
So that's the issue I have with Tiffany. The historical value, I would think maybe we would want to an extent, relax, because it's still a story. When it's all said and done, when a person sits down and writes a story and writes a script, they're going to put their perspective on it. Then they're going to submit it to the white shirts and they're going to put their perspective on it. And if you want to see it on any medium, those two things have to match. And so I always look at that and I say, okay. So they thought it was a good idea to, you know, go the homosexual route. That's not new. They thought it was a good idea. I didn't see her as stealing. We talked about this the other day. I didn't see her as stealing the recipe. And that was kind of played up, but that was also a matter of perspective as well. Nothing built is new. I mean, the time of, like true invention of the wheel and flying and all that stuff has already come to pass. I think what she did do, or what could have happened, is if what'd you say her name was? Allison? Annie. If Annie did come up with a product, then she could have just improved upon the product. I don't know. None of us really, really know until, we drill down into some serious archives. But that could have been, would that have been a more interesting story? As opposed to the, antagonistic, she stole my recipe and she made millions. And then this character acquiesces to the fact that she's made millions and she hasn't. Like I think Evan said, that doesn't make sense. None of it, so many components really just didn't make sense for me. But my 11-year-old got it and she was happy. Yeah. That's my story.
That is so interesting because that's what I kept thinking, like, okay, I've lived a very interesting life, and I feel like truth is often stranger than fiction. I tend to hear this thing that people say about historical fiction where they're like, well, it wouldn't have, the original story wouldn't have been as interesting. I hear that a lot. And I find that really fascinating that people actually entertain that, because how is that possible?
I know, I winced when you said that. I can't believe people say that.
People say, like, that's the kind of thing that is said. I don't know if a producer would go on, on record saying that, but
Black people say that? Black people say that? You heard black people?
People in general hear that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's,
not like it matters. I was asking.
Yeah. It just tends to be a part of the conversation when you say, this was, I guess it's I don't know. I don't want to say it's about enlightenment, but like a lot of people think that and or entertain that possibility. And I'm curious, what do you guys think about that?
Well, most stories taken from the highlights of your life. I mean, those are the interesting parts. Nobody would want to see, this could be considered a highlight in any one of our lives if it leads to a turning point. But if it doesn't lead to a turning point, nobody cares about us sitting on Zoom talking about a movie. So
yeah, I guess two very quick things from me. Well, I hope this inspires someone else to make an actual 2-hour film that is more accurate. That's one. The second one is, what'd you say, Ivan?
Just thinking that.
Yeah.
When you're done, I'll tell you what I was.
Yeah, so that's one. Someone should make a new movie. The second one is, I'm glad that these controversies are there. Hopefully this even makes it a much bigger conversation. So that I see this is getting recorded, it gets posted everywhere, more people talking about it, writing on Twitter, writing everywhere. So we all now know more about Madam CJ Walker, because I knew nothing about her. I just knew her name. It's great to see she met Rockefeller. That's incredible. I thought, living right next to him, and she deserved to be there. It's just incredible. So that's the second. Yeah, those are the two pieces. And then if anyone knows why the company had to close down in the 70s, I would love to hear.
That is what I'm anxious to know. I'm like, what happened to the actual company?
They were acquired. They were acquired by I'm sorry, but they were acquired.
By who?
Well, the front company was, if you're a child of the 70s, remember Posner's? I don't know who the parent company was. I would have to look that up, but they were acquired by Posner's.
Interesting. I've heard of
it. They converted into another black hair product, or
it was still a black hair care product, but it had a parent. I know for some time Posner's was under Beatrice, but I would imagine back in the 70s, it was under a different parent company.
Is that Beatrice Reginald Lewis?
Yes.
It's so funny you said that, because as y'all were talking, I was thinking about a point about Reginald Lewis in relation to this, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Something Alex was saying, but I'm gonna wait till y'all.
But you know that Reginald Lewis comes out of the mainstream marketing. So he built his empire thusly. But based on what I read, Posner was a growing brand for the African American market because everybody was, rocking their naturals. And then
Reginald Lewis acquired it. Beatrice acquired it. TLC Beatrice.
No, Reginald Lewis acquired. I think Reginald Lewis acquired Posner after it was already acquired by a major company.
Gotcha.
Because it was a brand that they couldn't quite understand.
Okay.
That was a marketing approach that they couldn't understand in like the late 70s going into the 80s. And so Reginald Lewis acquired it under Beatrice.
Okay, I'd love to, even gather some resources or links for us, like, beyond this call, and just share more factual information because, so some of the things that we called out that we said we wanted to make sure to talk about today was, the first one was entrepreneurship, and I want to talk a bit about the portrayal of entrepreneurship. I think one of the things that I wrote in my, article about the film was how there's a dearth of content about that experience, right? And I will say, I want to have, it shows up as M. Drew on here, so I don't know what your first name is. So I want you to tell us your name because, you're somebody who joined us and we haven't got to hear from you yet, and I want to make sure you get a chance to say something. So say what's up, tell us where you're at. Tell us a little bit about you and what your initial thoughts were about the film, and then we'll go into the entrepreneurship question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan, and hi. I've really been enjoying this chat. And I would have to say, I hope that there's another movie or something else that comes out about her. I feel like this was very fun. But I wish it was a little bit more serious and a little bit more factual. But I'm in from New Jersey as well. So,
yeah. I mean, so the word agenda came up a few times. The conversation has been steered towards, focus on the veracity of the story. And I think that's a good thing because, what we're ultimately trying to do at NOIR FEST is we're not just about to have some, just some fun parties. It's about really digging deep and figuring out how to sort of get us out of this mess, right? And that's why we want to tell aspirational stories, visionary stories that help us create a new future. So I'm really curious about why stories about Black women entrepreneurs or Black entrepreneurs in general are so lacking, because the truth is that there's always been tons of us. And I mean, if you guys have seen stuff out there that is, beautiful content about Black entrepreneurship, what were your impressions or thoughts about the way her, I guess the way her journey was portrayed as far as an entrepreneur is valuable, but just the fact that there isn't much content about that, how, does anybody else notice that? Or is that just the thing that bothers me?
I literally just typed a message on the chat, like we're thinking the same thing, quite similar to that. I was like, it would be great if after your work, I think that this is the first of many, but I'm hoping after loads of your work, most people can name 5 to 10 Black successful people. Either you define them as millionaires, 100 millionaires, or successful because of their impact. Wow. You could just say them from your head, like we just know their names, who are alive today and doing things. Like right now, I don't think that we know. I don't know that I can mention 5. I have to think about it or do a Google search.
Can anybody mention 5 Black millionaires or billionaires? People are muted. I think we might mute
5 Black millionaires or billionaires?
I mean,
yeah, like folks you aspire to, and just be able to just say them.
Male or female, I guess Robert Smith, right? He's one. Who else? Let's try to think of someone who may not be hip hop.
Yeah.
We know Earl Graves Jr. just died.
Yeah, Earl Grey. Is he a billionaire? He's a millionaire, definitely. The lady who has the makeup brand, she's not a billionaire, but Pat McGrath, right? Pat McGrath. I would probably say Shonda Rhimes.
The Star Wars guy's wife. What's her name?
Melody No, is it Melody Hobson?
George Lucas' wife.
I think it is. Yeah, George Lucas's wife.
Her first name is Melody.
I don't know her name.
What does George Lucas's wife do?
Yeah, what's
She's
she
a
do?
hedge fund manager.
Yeah. Melody. Yeah, you're right. Melody Hobson is her maiden name.
Yeah, of course, right? But I'm trying to stay off the people who we know off the top of our head, maybe the people we don't hear as much about, who are not sports related or.
Are we doing men and women?
I say men and women, right?
Yes, men and women.
I would love.
What's his name? Is not a billionaire, but he's close to it. Kenya Barris.
Right.
The blackish guy. I didn't realize he was worth as much as he is.
How much is he worth? I didn't know.
Right now I'm seeing 750 million.
700 million?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Huh.
I didn't know he was worth that much. I wouldn't have put him over 100 million.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't see how he'd make that much. How many shows he has created? 2?
Oh no, he's got about 6 shows, and then he produces quite a few movies.
Okay. I would put him probably about closer to 200 million, but it's just me.
Okay, was that helpful, Alex? I was thinking.
Yeah, no, very, very helpful. Like, and hopefully it doesn't just stop here. So it's about knowing these names. That's the best. Just know many of them. And the next step is around what did they do, how did they get there, and then more movies, just more content, so that we are able to share examples of just many ways of becoming successful. And success is not just money, right? I've just used money as an example, 10 million, 100 million, but other means of success, impact, helping other folks. That'd be great for also have these examples.
So here's a question that came up while you were speaking. How do you guys consume content about Black people, right? So you talked about films, right? So if like films were made about each of these people, then more people would know about them, and that would be wonderful. But how do you get that information even outside of film right now?
How do we do what? Say again?
How do you guys get that information right now? Like, what platform would you look to tell you about like the next Black millionaire or billionaire?
Yeah, I feel like there are quite a few platforms. I think we've named a few millionaires and billionaires, but like especially magazines like Black Enterprise, they do regular features on Black millionaires, and there's really like a whole bunch of new kind of I guess they came out of the recession, those types of millionaires at least, that have the startups. So I feel like that number is pretty significant. They're not household names yet, just because they're, I think, whatever, nouveau riche. They're not like Earl Graves Jr. and the Johnsons, from, what is it, Essence or whatever, the publications. They're definitely like a lot of, long-term millionaires and billionaires, but we do have like this whole generation. And I know Lottie and I've been talking about this publication called The Plug, and The Plug Daily, and it was designed specifically to highlight, these new millionaires and these new companies. And so I get a pretty consistent feed of on entrepreneurship. So I don't think it's as lacking as it used to be as far as people being aware of who's out there making money. I think there's a big push now to publicize our people that are business owners.
Can I say something about Black entrepreneurship? I'm sorry, then.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, were you done? I didn't want to cut you off.
Yes, I'm finished.
Sorry about that. One of the things, I don't know, just a little shift in talking about entrepreneurship. and I don't know if we talked about this a lot, but one of the things I've heard and see, particularly with entrepreneurs, Black people, I saw that even in the documentary from Netflix. She did that. The people who own the crab bar, right? She stated it. I know people in New York the same way. The access to capital is very difficult, particularly for Black businesses, for Black entrepreneurs. You know, I'm not gonna put this particular organization out there, but there's some organizations that sort of pub themselves as or with funding Black entrepreneurs and la. And I had a friend of mine who was a Black entrepreneur who co-founded this, who was a co-founder on this one idea her and her partner selling. They went to these people said, we went to so-and-so, they don't have any money. But if you go to their IG and their Facebook, they're doing A, B, C, and D. And I'm like, what? Now, what you mean they don't have any money? She said, yeah, they have like 25, 40,000, some thousands of followers. They don't have no money. But they talk about how they funded these many people this year, that many people last year. So just to access to capital, I think my big thing, saying all that to say, my big thing is encouraging entrepreneurs on this, this Zoom and including myself, is to, as you sort of build, to put aside money and start funds or get together and start funds to invest in other startups coming up from people from the diaspora, particularly who are brilliant, who have trouble raising money. I think there's and let me just say this, there's and one of the ways to do that is to obviously take less money for yourselves, take what you need, but still sort of, or set aside a tithe or a certain amount of money out of your net income to help build that fund, if that makes any sense, and that fund's really an investment. You're helping people, but you're still investing in people. It's still an investment move.
That was one of the most memorable parts of the film for me, was her process of fundraising, right? And so we'll go into the Black masculinity conversation maybe when I talk about the investor that she went to who tried to attack her. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that I appreciated was the starting from solving a problem for herself, but also just starting small, starting from scratch, right? Like that, I think that the film gave us a lot of great entrepreneurial strategies. It reinforced a lot of the stuff that I learned in, the business classes I took at Yale and Sci-City. It was very beautiful to see her just build up from nothing and to just keep fighting, right? And I think that, clearly that's what happened in the real story, but we hear a lot more about the lack of funding. I get so much news about the lack of funding. I don't get news about the deals that break, because there's still people are getting funded. People are there's a sister who I'm telling more people about, and I guess it's our job to amplify the stories that we know about. Who's heard of Tastemakers Africa here?
I have.
So Alex and Sabrina are look up Tastemakers Africa. Look up Birthright Africa if you haven't heard about them. These are platforms but Tastemakers Africa just raised $1 million last year from private. I don't know if it was private equity, VC, or whatever. But she's been doing that work for the last several years and finally broke and was able to raise some money. And there are entrepreneurs that are doing stuff. There's this Black VC platform that hosted an event a few days ago to help people think through Corona. So I don't know if it's like Sabrina was saying, nouveau rich, the platforms are not big enough. But I think on one hand, it's important for us to drive that narrative. On the other hand, there's there's probably, powers that be that are not crazy about that narrative getting pushed, right? Because I can only wonder how many stories of Black entrepreneurs or success stories of those types of families have been presented to Hollywood producers or presented to, or scripts or whatever have been talked about and rejected. So yeah, so just in terms of the film, if there's anything that you guys have thoughts on or you want to say about entrepreneurship before we, shift into the Black masculinity conversation, I want to give time for that.
Yeah, I just dropped
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's very, very quick. I just searched through my email and realized I'm part of a ton of groups here in the Bay Area, and I found these 3 links. I just put them in the chat. They're really great. So one of them is a small blog that then introduces a list to all the Black folks who've raised a ton of money in America, and that they continue to this was put together like some Black VCs here in the Bay Area, and they'll continue to update that. And then the other one is execs at different companies.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. See?
Thank you.
NOIR Press.
I didn't even know that they were there in the email. I'm gonna bookmark these now and look at it every month.
Yeah, same here.
I was just gonna say, along with the funding piece, has anyone seen the movie The Banker with Sam Jackson?
I wanted to see that. Dang it.
That goes like fundamentally to what you're talking about. I won't give away the story because it's really, really an interesting watch. But essentially, you have these 2 Black businessmen who, in order to get the funding to do what they wanted to do, they used white people as their front.
Yeah.
And that's something I have always considered being a Black female business person. And they were able to, they downplayed it in the movie, but if you pay attention and you listen to, you're watching what's happening, they pretty much were the reason for the neighborhoods in Southern California, because they had so much property. And then they tried to open a bank. And when they tried to open a bank, the government came for them.
Wow. What did the government do to them? That's in the film.
You gotta watch the movie. Watch the movie. It's
on Netflix.
Yes, it is it's either on Netflix or Amazon, but it was in the theaters last year. But I believe it's
Apple TV.
Let me say this.
Apple TV. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me say this.
I feel like I might have seen it on Netflix at one point. Okay, thank you.
It's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
I will make sure to watch that with Yaya too.
So I missed like the conversation of fundraising, but I want to bring like some historical context to that, but through health, because we tend to forget a lot about health. At the same time, what Madam C.J. Walker was fundraising, there were Black hospitals being created in Chicago. And a lot of those Black hospitals were formed because of Black people coming together and using their funding to create the hospital. And a lot of stories on that is not even talked about. But
can you drop some links?
It was like Providence Hospital. I can see if there's an article about it and stuff like that. But historically, that was one of the Black hospitals in Chicago. And it literally was funded by regular Black people, working class, who donated like the supplies was needed, donated the money. And basically, I think it was actually where the first open heart surgery was done by a Black physician, was at that hospital, funded on Black money. So just showing that the importance of highlighting that Black people do donate, not just to the church, but they also donate to the community. Because there's always this narrative, especially now, that the Black dollar doesn't circulate the community. And that's not a true narrative. It does. And we just have to show that it has done that in the past and get people the idea that you can do it now.
Can you believe she's only 25? How old are you, babe? So wise. Just so wise.
I'm 28, but thank you. I'll take 25.
Okay, well, it's because you look 25. You got a baby face. Listen, guys. Okay, so I am so passionate, as you clearly already know, about entrepreneurship. And like, my favorite film is Malcolm X. I watched it when I was 7 with my mom. My mom never took us to the movies ever, but she took me and my brother, who was like 3 at the time or 4, to watch Malcolm X and watch him get shot and all of that. And I remember my mom saying stuff about like how you should just, can I say this on the recording? You just purge all the leaders of Nigeria, right? So like when Nigerian elders get together, like all they talk about is how you should just kill all the leaders. So listen, like Malcolm X is the core thing that came from him and Marcus Garvey is entrepreneurship, right? Like we have to own our shit. We have to build our own shit. We have to build our own institutions. And it's, you know, it's easy to question like, oh, why don't we do that, right? But we do, we've always done it. But, you know, there are powers that be that don't want that to happen, or there's cultural issues that make it from, you know, that keep platforms from growing. So I think, you know, I love to see stories about entrepreneurship, because I think like when we can plant those ideas in Black people's minds, I want every Black person to be an entrepreneur. I want all of us to own whatever, right? Like Shauna and you know, Shauna and I were part of a group that's starting that we're trying to teach our daughters how to build institutions, right? And make sure that they are empowered with like financial literacy and all these levels of literacy. But how do we use storytelling to push these narratives, to push this idea of owning our own, to remind us of what we've already done, because it's not something that is like undoable, that's never been done. It's something that we've always done. So I just had to say that. If y'all have any thoughts on that, good. Otherwise, we'll go into black masculinity, because I know people want to say things about that.
Yeah, it's definitely done. One thing I want to appreciate about Madam C.J. Walker's story, and in general, and when I said earlier that it's tough for Black entrepreneurs to raise capital, I definitely wasn't using that as any excuse by any stretch of the imagination. I think that we've always had to. One thing I appreciated in Madam C.J. Walker, she was a saleswoman, incredible amount of grit, you know. Sort of a determination you're going to need, no matter whether you're white, Black, wherever. You're going to need that. You're going to have to believe in yourself. Probably have to do that more so as a person of color. And the reason I say that, if you ever seen the Fry Festival films, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, have y'all seen them? Just FYI. Just,
yeah,
you know.
that was bad.
Yeah. Okay. So we won't get into that, but you know, and then also just something I saw. Someone actually said this, and I actually agree with them. I don't agree with everything they say sometimes, but sometimes they can go real crazy. But no, we know, as Black people, not just in the United States, but around the diaspora, we're sort of behind the curve in a lot of things, you know. So he said this, and I'll never forget. He said, "We're not trying to catch up. I don't think we should be trying to catch up. We should be forward thinking." As much as we can in terms of how we find solutions. We should get ahead of the curve. But let me give you an example, a practical example. I have a mentor, preacher. He's from Mississippi, and he's a pastor down in Alabama. And I was reading this book, great book, if you ever had a chance to read it, called The Warmth of Other Suns. Probably my favorite book I read this year, right? But they talked about how many of the times in the South, you know, the white schools would get all the nice new books and so on and so forth. The Black schools was incredibly underfunded. When white schools threw their books out and got new textbooks, the Black teachers would go to the dumpster and get some of the books that were thrown out to use for the Black students, right? This mentor of mine said, Evan, I remember that. He's 10 years old. He's about 60, maybe 67, maybe. No, more than 10 years, but more than 10 years. But he's in his late 60s, but he was saying that he remembers that growing up in Mississippi, how the teachers would teach them algebra, I think in 8th or 9th grade. So by the time the high schools were integrated, in 11th grade, the white kids were just learning algebra, but the Black kids already learned it because the Black teachers got ahead of the curve. They were 14 and said, well, we're going to teach y'all early. So when integration came around, which just was unexpected, they were already ahead, you know. This is Mississippi, you know, which has major problems. So I think the same can apply to entrepreneurship. How we apply to look at entrepreneurship, you know, never give up. And we just got, like she never gave up, and you just got to think ahead of the curve. And not try to catch
powerful. No, I said that's powerful. That's a powerful thought. I definitely subscribe to that. That's a new one for me, and I'll subscribe to it. I just posted a link to, there's a lady called Maria, I can never say her last name, Lichtenstein. Okay, I tried. So she's actually in the Bay. Got to speak to her about a month ago, and she's working on she's doing deep research, just like Faith is researching health policy. She's researching on just the history of raising money in America for all groups. And then she's a Black lady. And so she's looking at, you know, tying that back to how Black people are systemically, you know, excluded from being able to raise funds. And she's found out very many interesting things. And so she's trying to kind of, I don't know how it works, but somehow she would help. She's applying to get policies in place that make it easier for Black folks to raise funds. So that's one. So it's interesting to just check out her work, and if there's ways we can support her, I think we should. That's one. And to Lola, your point of like just becoming more entrepreneurial, like Malcolm X was saying, I think COVID. So I can speak to how COVID is kind of changing things in the African space. I don't know how it's changing things in America, right? But the African space, now that global, it's harder to ship things, so people are now being forced to make it themselves. And so you now have local factories starting with masks and then starting to manufacture other things. And so these are activities that never happened before COVID. Like before COVID, no one in Nigeria, for example, wanted to use anything made in Nigeria. But now they're being forced to use made in Nigeria masks, made in Nigeria equipment for cars and stuff. And hopefully it becomes a norm afterwards. We'll see.
Wow. Yeah, I could go on and on. We could go on about this. We have to have another conversation about this. But I want to make sure if there's other thoughts on, on the film in particular, that we get to them. So as far as the Black masculinity piece, we've talked a little bit about Booker T and Du Bois, right? And I think that sort of dichotomy is one of the things that stood out for me. But then, of course, Jay, the husband, right, and his sort of trajectory. So when it started, I was like, oh my God, they're so in love, this is perfect. But I was like, this is too good to be true. I started, like my brain was trained like to be prepared. I was like, wait, where's this gonna go wrong? And so we see the relationship unravel, and of course, the trope of the light-skinned mistress. But also, and then you have Ransom, who adored Madam C.J. Walker, the entire journey. He wanted to make sure he was the first to invest in her. He even, went out of his comfort zone, or broke one of his personal rules to be able to invest in her business. And so I think they at least tried, at least they had good Black men in the film. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What did you guys think of the Black male characters? And what do you think, the agenda of the film was as far as Black men and Black masculinity?
I just didn't like how they portrayed that the Black woman and the Black man can't work together. That in terms when it comes to entrepreneurship, that one or the other will win, and not the idea that you can work together. In how it, I think it was already said how it affected their marriage and their ability to be partners. Because originally when, we saw them in Bliss, he was very much gun-ho about her project. He was very much a part of it and all this kind of stuff. And they also portrayed the Black man in terms of his having a fetish for lighter skin or European features, because he was a guy who was an ad person, and when he showed her the ad, he showed very much, European feature, light-skinned woman. And that's what they're saying drove them apart in their marriage. The idea that he always wanted a light-skinned woman, which is not the case. And this huge belief that Black men always want light-skinned women is very overplayed, I feel like. And it's based off of I think what the media wants us to believe, that the whole that white women are always the better choice, and which is not really true. It's very much a Hollywood type of belief. I think so, but that's just my opinion.
Wait. Can we do a quick poll? I don't even know how to use the Zoom thing, but I'm curious. Is it true that that most Black men prefer white women? Can you just raise your hand if you think it's true that most Black men prefer white women, or
I want to jump in a little bit. I don't necessarily believe that most Black men prefer white women, although I don't want to try to speak for Black men, because we have Black men on the call who can speak for themselves. But what I would say, Faith mentioned the idea that it's not necessarily true that Black men would prefer a lighter skinned woman. I think it just depends on the region you're in. Being from New York, I have seen a lot of Black men who really love Black women and the diversity. However, the people I've encountered from the South, I've seen be a lot different. And even my girlfriends from the South have said this, whether they be light skin or dark skin or in between or whatever it is. So I think that the film was accurate, especially for the time period. Now, I wasn't there, but I mean, from what we've seen in history, that has been the case. So again, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think it was overplayed. As a matter of fact, I don't think we have the conversation enough as Black people. It's constantly Black women bringing it up, but I don't see as much feedback from Black men about it. And when I do speak to Black men that I personally know, they're like, I don't have that problem. But as I speak to a lot of Black women, they encounter a lot of Black men and have that issue. So I don't know if it's necessarily a white women thing as much as it's the light skin, dark skin conversation, which I don't think we've done a really good job of really investigating and having those real conversations.
So we have a couple people in the chat that said, well, the Black men in the chat, 2 of the Black men that said they don't think it's true.
Yeah, I don't think it's true. Yeah, I don't have any data to support it. But
Oh, let me let you get introduced, Jennifer, because I know we're gonna wrap up soon. So I want to make sure that everybody knows Jen is my favorite doctor. She's the one I'm always hyping up as a naturopathic healer. Tell everybody where you're at. She's from Haiti. Say some things and what were your sort of major impressions from the film?
Okay. I didn't want to disrupt. I was actually on a birthday call, so that's why I'm late. So no, not mine. Somebody had a virtual birthday party, and so I just wanted to support them. Like Lola mentioned, I'm a naturopathic doctor. A lot of people don't know who we are, but the reason why I think it's important that we do know, and I'm just going to be real brief with this, is because I'm running into a lot of Black people in general who are talking about they're looking for doctors that listen to them. They're looking for doctors who know about herbs and about drugs. And so for people who are not aware, there are doctors, and I'm not slighting anybody else because I'm one of those people who's integrative in mindset. So I believe that every doctor has their place. Now, saying that, a lot of people I've encountered have said, oh my God, I didn't realize there was someone who I can have a visit with for an hour, or I didn't realize that there were doctors who do know about herbs and pharmaceuticals. So regardless of whether you're familiar with me or not, I just want to make sure that the people on the call are aware that there are doctors out there for all the complaints that people have about modern medicine, especially right now. So that's what I am. That's what I do. I also have a background in public health and mental health counseling. So that's kind of like me. Since Lola invited me to do that, I do not want to hijack this call. But as far as the film, I saw it like a few weeks ago. And, what struck me about the movie, since we're talking about relationships, is I too, Lola, unfortunately went into the film. I was so excited about the Black couple together, working together, and about how it was gonna manifest. And I was saddened by, when they started having their own drama. I was really disappointed by that because I was rooting for their relationship because I don't think I see enough of that in the media. So anyway, but I appreciated the entrepreneurship part of it because I myself am on that, on that vein, and I believe in Black empowerment and entrepreneurship and us supporting each other and all that good stuff. So I appreciate the fact that I could watch a movie like that and see that vein, because I do think, like someone else said, that we should be moving in that direction. I also believe that, Black women are really killing it right now as far as entrepreneurship. And I'd like to see more ways for us to work together. I'm sure there's so many people on this call who have entrepreneurship ventures. And I hope there's some space for us to all like share our ventures and try to figure out ways to work together. So that's all I got to say. Like I said, I don't want to take up too much time, but since you asked me to speak, that's just an overall view that I have.
Appreciate that. I'm sure that everybody appreciated hearing from you. Because, COVID is real. Get you a naturopathic doctor. Get you somebody.
Yeah, I just feel like yeah, I just feel like overall, like as Black people, we don't realize that we can have a team. It's not, you know, this person versus that person, this medicine versus that type of medicine. Like everybody can work together and everyone has different skill sets. So, you know, if you're having, you know, issues mentally, you need to see a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist. You know, if you have an issue with certain areas of your body, you need to see the expert in that. So for me, like if there's a trauma, you see a surgeon. But if you're going to talk about preventative medicine, people need to have a naturopathic doctor on board. It does not have to be me, but I'm championing that because I was looking for a doctor like what I became for so many years. And I could not find someone who could listen to me and could address me from the root issue. It just always seemed to be like pacifying me. And so I know there are exceptions, but unfortunately people don't have access to that. So if you have access to doctors who are listening, who are, you know, taking everything into account, let's share these resources. It's not just me, but I'm championing my profession because people don't know about us and they're not aware. So I'm just speaking for that.
Okay, and then mic drops and clanks and bangs. Okay.
I'm just saying, we need to know, like we need to know, we don't know our resources, right? And unfortunately people are like Googling, they're, you know, running into healers that are fugazi, sorry to say it, but they don't know what they're talking about.
It actually takes us into one of the other topics, which is women's entrepreneurship, right? Or women's empowerment, sorry. So I think, you know, and you guys
can I say one thing about black masculinity real quick?
Well, yeah, I'm not necessarily cutting us off on black masculinity. But yeah, go ahead, Evan, because I
wrote it out real quick.
That men investing in women part is what I really want to get to. Okay, but go ahead.
First of all, you know, I think that when it comes to the rascals in manhood, you find that there's parity in that, period. You know, whatever the race.
When you say rascal and manhood, what does that mean?
There's good and bad. There's bad. There's bad. I call them rascals. There's guys who are rascals.
Okay.
Rascal, I'm meaning people who are going to be destructive to anything. You know?
Okay.
No, but here's the thing. When we talked about this initially, just going back to Madam C.J. Walker, you know, a couple of things that were brought up. You know, because it was inspired by, right? And then I think your sister had mentioned the fact that a lot of stuff's fictionalized, which now makes you question if there's some sort of agenda, right? So you have the daughter. We don't really know if the daughter was a lesbian. Addie Monroe never really existed. Someone here did research and found out C.J. Walker and her husband were really partners for a long time. You know, did they separate because the other young lady was a light-skinned woman? We don't know. But at the end of the show, they said there's no pictures of them. They started the company, but there's no pictures that exist. The Walker Larry, remember they started a company called Walker Larry? Afterward, they tell you what happened to everybody. And then they said, if you see at the end of the series, they said the Walker Larry company, her husband CJ broke off, started the company.
Yeah.
There were no pictures. They had pictures of everybody else but those two, right? So we don't even know if she's light skinned, right? So, and then, I mean, if it was really true that, and then you had the son-in-law, right, John, who they should have fired that dude after the house burned down. You know what I mean? I was like,
that dude was making my skin crawl.
I mean, why was he even around doing anything, you know, after that, right? But so I mean, so yeah, it's fine if as far as black masculinity, if that's the best way for me to talk about it, you know, I didn't really, I guess I didn't really see a problem in terms of. I think there was some balance in the portrayals, to some degree, but then I question sort of if especially with C.J. Walker, if they were really partners, then I mean, I just question that storyline now, you know, and I think, what else was I going to say? I'm trying to put together my notes here. Yeah, I just question a lot of the storyline. I mean, just based on the fact that, you know, one of the major parts of it, like I said, is they sidestepped one of the major problems of the time, which I think was race. They just sidestepped it, and I feel like they may have used a lot of that other stuff, the conflict with the husband, the fake colorism conflict, to basically create conflict and drama that probably may not have been her biggest obstacles. You know what I mean? May not have been her biggest obstacles. You know. Yeah. So I think going back to what Alex may have said this. You know, I wanted to respond to this. I remember the two. If you know anything about westerns, the two, and I'm gonna close out by saying the two westerns about Wyatt Earp. Right? They both came out the same time. One was called Wyatt Earp, and one was called Tombstone. Right? And Tombstone got all the smoke, all the shine. It was so good. You know, I think Val Kilmer got an Oscar nomination for playing Doc Holliday. Great movie if you ever see it. So I think that, you know, the positive, C.J. Walker was put on the map for a lot of people. I think there's always, no one says you can't do another C.J. Walker movie. You can't do another C.J. Walker series. No one says you can't do it. You know, this is just the beginning of it. It's a fair effort, you know, that even got done. There's a lot of other problems. Let me say this too real quickly. I know we're going to cut it off soon. That we could address the fact that LeBron James' company and Maverick Carter's company saw this and decided to do it. You know, we didn't get to talk about story development, which I think is where the main problem began. You know, which has to do with terms which, and I think there's a lot of people's stories that would not have been done if they weren't developed correctly. And this wasn't developed correctly from the start. But that's it. Black masculinity. I don't know if I responded to the black masculinity. I guess I said I doubt sort of their portrayal of it. I guess where I'm going with that. If that makes sense.
Wow. So many things. So many things. And I'm asking myself, like, the real question is, like, what do we do next? Because these conversations have to continue, right? The whole reason that we're building what we're building is to create a space where conversations like this are had daily and are constructive towards an actual outcome, right? And we want to make sure to utilize art and film and technology to make that happen. But how do we, you know, utilize what we have right here and now, which is you guys, right, on this Zoom call? Because I think that the first step is really continuing the conversation and making sure to continue the conversation, like committing to that, and then making it enjoyable. Mm-hmm. Right? So just to tie that into, you know, some of the stuff that you brought up, Evan, I think just storytelling, I'm hoping that so many of us are going to go away from this and like research these people, because I know I want answers to now I want to know the real story. Because I always believe that truth is stranger than fiction. The things that I've seen happen before my eyes, I'm like, you can't make this shit up, you know? And so it makes you want to know more of the truth. But, you know, we wanted to talk a little bit about women's empowerment before we close out. We will send out like a survey. I'd love to take a couple of minutes. If you guys have any like feedback, feel free to drop stuff in the chat. But the key question that we have is, how would you like to continue to engage? We want to keep seeing your faces. We want to keep these conversations going. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of, you know, films. I came across an online African film festival today that I'll put in the chat for you guys to check out. Amazing. I was crying. I watched this amazing film that I was like, every high schooler needs to see this film. Every Black high school, especially girls. It's about these women in Djibouti, which, like, how many of us ever have heard of that country? Gorgeous film that teaches you so much, you know, about being human. So it's really a question of how can we keep it moving? So women's empowerment, any thoughts on that? And anything I just said for the next 12 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, calm down, kids. Don't shout. I can't hear all the noise.
I'd rather hear from the women on this one, because
and I want to hear from Devin and Alex about Black masculinity in the film still too. You guys are saying.
I was gonna say something quick. I'm reading the chat, and not to put Timmy on the spot, but she was talking about how this story was new to her, and I'm interested to hear from her, like, what concepts of women empowerment she got from it, or not even knowing the history of Madam C.J. Walker and like seeing this film, like overall thoughts?
Thank you for putting me on the spot. I've been trying to avoid this. I've been listening. As I said, everyone sounds like Lolade sent me a message and I was like, I do not have the range for this kind of conversation. I think I come from this. I'm from Nigeria and I also lived in the UK, and a lot of these stories were either things you heard about in passing or maybe so I think the first time I ever heard about Madam C.J. Walker was probably in a sister episode or something like that, and it was just like a throwaway comment. So watching it, so for me the value of this was like, obviously I agree with Tiffany Haddish was just a bit too much of a caricature for me, and I saw there were a lot of things that were problematic about it, but for me, it was one of the first few times I've seen American movies that took a main space on Netflix. It was getting a lot of press. That wasn't about slaves or Black women being raped, or just the very struggle side of Black content. And so a bit of context, I'm at the School of Management at Yale, and I met Lolade because I was helping her with NOIR FEST through Sci-City. So I remember one of her main things was always around how do we have beautiful Black content, and how do we show the side of Blackness that isn't so based on just struggle. So coming to this, I had no idea. I didn't really know her story beyond she was the first Black billionaire. She had a business. She was an entrepreneur. All the stuff I used in my hair when I was growing up pretty much came from her. And I think coming from a culture where Black people are the majority, race is not really discussed as much. Of course, nowadays we're having a lot more conversations around colorism and the value that's placed in that. But coming personal experience where that has not been, I've never faced any of those struggles, and I don't have that sort of internalized. That hasn't been I haven't been in cultures where I've been raised to have those thoughts in my mind. I always struggle in these kind of conversations because I wonder how to navigate this conversation, which is why I asked beyond the people who are knowledgeable. And so I think, okay, the normal Caucasian person, or the non-white person, or the non-Black American, you're Black but you're not American, how do you engage with this content? What are you gaining from it? What do you learn from it? What is the value in it?
So how would the film have been more valuable to you? Like,
I honestly did not. So having this conversation now, there's a lot of things that I'm like, okay, maybe I should watch it again and like come back to it with this new knowledge. And that's why knowledge is power, and, speaking to people who are knowledgeable about these things. But I think about not many people have this opportunity or these kinds of forums. So if I was sitting in the UK watching this, I'm thinking, okay, cool. Like I might go and do some more research and stumble across a thought piece. But artistically and for artistic value, beyond the Tiffany Haddish, it does look like a beautiful movie. It did inspire me somewhat, because I was like, okay, this is someone who doesn't even fit the aesthetic of Hollywood, being this powerful woman, being this badass. Yes, there are problematic areas they showed her as emasculating her husband and all of that, but whatever. That's me just recognizing that there's still a lot of issues we have to get through, but I wanted the value of someone who is outside this bubble, outside the bubble of the Black American story and the Black American dream, can take from this.
So it sounds like, one of the things that I'm hearing, and I'm thinking as you're saying that, is it sounds like you would benefit from content like, I remember the scene in Harlem where, I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was a fantasy or what, where, they're sitting outside in a cafe, and she's just like mesmerized. Tiffany Haddish's character, Layla, she's mesmerized by the colorful women. I think she says something about the Caribbean and, all the different flavors that exist in that space, and all the different ways to be Black. And I do, again, that's why NOIR FEST is, our intention is global, because I think it's so powerful when you have a space or story where you get to see all the different types of Blackness.
Yeah.
Because what that does, that the humanization of that is what changes the way that we're viewed, right? It's like, oh, there's layers and layers and layers under this one individual person. It's not, the same across the board. And that makes it harder for people to treat you like a throwaway.
Mm.
So I think what I'm hearing, and I love that you got to share. I'm so thankful that you said some things, because I know a lot of times like we beat each other up because, like you're not where I am, you're not where it's supposed to be, but that's not really the solution, right? Like we're all in different points in our journey of learning. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to not know everything. But the fact that you're engaging with it is super amazing. So, but I think, yeah, it really, I would love to see stories about Black women entrepreneurs from Brazil and from Nigeria and from, freaking South Asia. But, where's the money for that? That's what we want to, those are the funnels that we want to create, right? So that it's not just the Black American story that's being funded. We're seeing more and more stuff come out. Like I said, I'll share some of the content I've come across with you guys, but the biggest block has always been the value of the quality of the work, right? A lot of the stuff that you'll see that does come across most of our, way, that includes, that is like non-Black American, tends to be ugly or sad or miserable, right? Like you really have to sift through to find like, I watched a couple of things on this platform I was telling you guys about earlier, and the first one was this tragic story where this kid, both her parents died of AIDS, and I was like, I had to turn it off. Like where's the hope in that? So all of that to say, I get you, I hear you, and I think we're working on that. I think we're working on making the story bigger. But it's good that you still got a lot out of it, right? Because at the end of the day, for me, I imagine that watching the same story, and I choose my content based on color. I'm very specific in that way. So I don't think the film would have meant as much to me if it was some white woman. I don't think I would have internalized the possibility at the level. And we all know what the importance of representation is. And so just the fact that it's a story about a Black woman entrepreneur doing something that I want to do, that's enough for me, right? And I'm grateful for that. But I do recognize the importance of doing better and building better from that first seed. We have 3 minutes left. I'm not in a rush, but I want to make sure that I honor the time of anybody who needs to leave. So if you need to leave, if you want to say any last words, as far as the last couple of things that we've been saying, but I think feedback is important, and how would you like to continue to be engaged is important to hear.
I'm gonna have to go at 3. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say is I think this was great, Lalade, and I don't know, I guess depending on the group, how often you want to keep doing this. And I know you're building community behind what we're doing here. One thing, and we're already doing this. One thing I want to just reiterate and encourage us to just keep in mind. I think we're doing that. Is that, yeah, we're critiquing these stories, this content, some of these people. But ultimately, and I think Lalade and you and I talked about this, we're not doing this to bring people down. We're doing this to push a level of Black excellence, to keep the bar high for not just the people we're talking about, the producers, directors, writers, but even for ourselves. And it's more out of a love for the diaspora and really the world, not just the diaspora, And media is, even when we talk about this Madam C.J. Walker story, we're seeing how important it is to make sure the narrative is correct, to make sure that the narrative is truthful. And sometimes that narrative is going to contain some harsh images. You know what I mean? It's going to contain some stuff that we're going to have a difficult time. I know some. Let me give you an example. I have an idea to Because I'm a big fan of sort of what happened at Harper's Ferry. You know, I have some theories about that. A lot of people don't know the John Brown, who was a white man, his friend and his trusted friend was Frederick Douglass. One of the people who trained his guerrilla force was Harriet Tubman. You know what I mean? And sort of, and he was a man of faith. Harriet, so was Frederick Douglass, and so is Harriet Tubman, from what I know. You know, so those are so how I would like to. I have an idea to tell a story about that relationship with Frederick and John, but I want to do it without showing. You really have to show a whole bunch of slave images to tell that story, right? Because I don't know if Black people are gonna want to see that, you know. But you may have to have some of that in so to preserve the integrity and the truth of the experience, right? But at the end of the day, there's a hopefulness and there's a redemptive through line in the story, even though John Brown dies, you know. But I think that we're seeing in this the importance of just being honest with the narratives and being controlling our narratives, and also making sure we keep a level of depth to our narrative. Particularly when we talk about the story, and you have the box. My belief, the last thing I want to say about the self-made is you see, you know, like that was my problem with like the boxing images and stuff like that. I felt it was whoever was writing it took away from some of the depth of the story, or didn't trust the depth of the story, you know, of what was there already in that time period, in that context, in her life. So we want to make sure as much as we can to be truthful and redemptive at the same time. Thanks. That's all I want to say. All
Praise
right.
the Lord. We all say amen. That is a whole prayer right there. Yeah. So okay, we're gonna close it out. If you want to keep the conversation going, you always text me. I want to let my team go, especially because everybody has commitments. But you know, this has been amazing. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing. Thank you just being you know, open to engaging in this way, and you know, all that we learned from you. So we will send out a follow-up email just to make sure you have, you know, information on next steps. Alex shouted out our platform. We're working on it. You know, we need your help. We need to have people on there so we can test it out, so we can find the kinks. You know, there's a lot of work to be done on it, but we want to also know from you, like, what is the best way to be engaged? You want to stick to email. But yeah, let us know what your thoughts are.
All right.
So with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. Yeah, I cover y'all in the blood of Jesus. May you be safe and healthy. Eat your greens. Take your vitamin C. Get a naturopathic doctor to check in with you. Please take care of yourselves. It's really important, you know, at this time, and sleep and drink water. I'm trying my best too. So, all right.
Cheers, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Y'all take care, right? This is great. Lottie, I'm gonna send you a message on WhatsApp real quick, okay?
Okay, I'll look out for it.